This is my career interview with Craig McCarthy for my career interview for New Student Experience with Professor Perez.
And
My
this-
name is Kendall Shannon.
This is take two. We can do better. I'm Craig McCarthy. My work is as self-employed. I'm a sole practitioner at the law office of Craig A. McCarthy. My job title is owner.
Okay. So how long have you been doing this?
I have been an attorney since I was admitted to the bar in October of 1995.
Okay, so 19 years.
Yes.
How did you become a lawyer? How did you get interested in law?
So two different questions, and I'll answer it, and probably not the way that most people come to it. By background, I was the first in my family for as many generations as I've been aware of to ever go to college. So I was the first to go to law school as well. And before law school, I was in the United States Army. I was a junior officer in field artillery. So people sometimes ask me, "Oh, were you JAG?" That's the Judge Advocate General Corps. You know, was I a lawyer in the Army? No, I was not. I was doing something completely different. As a field artilleryman, I was stationed. The bulk of my service was in Berlin, Germany, and it was at around the time, not around, it was at exactly the time that the Berlin Wall fell figuratively, and East and West Germany was reunified, and just a lot of things were happening in the world. So I had intended to make the Army a career, but just because of that time in history, and it's a good thing, but sometimes you can't control events. In that time of history, you know, we had our commitment to protecting Western Europe had changed somewhat. East and West Germany had reunified. Much of the Eastern Bloc was now much freer in their governments. That combined with the fact that we had Desert Storm, which is the first Gulf War. The mood in the country was that the military doesn't need to be as big as it is, and there's a big reduction in forces. And so as part of that, I wasn't asked specifically as a person, but we junior officers in general were asked to, if we wanted to leave the Army earlier than our regular commitment and do something else, that we were kind of encouraged to do that. And so I'm making this a long story, but I was young married with a baby, and I was thinking, well, I don't want to get caught in a reduction of force involuntarily, so let me think about what else I want to do. And a friend of mine that I had gone to West Point with was also stationed in Berlin, and he had decided to leave the Army and go to law school. And I thought, well, while I'm figuring out what I want to do with my life, I'll go to law school.
As one does.
And I'm not the only one, but I went from the Army to law school because it seemed to make sense. It would give me time to maximize the options that I would have for what else I would do in life. And I had thought, and I prepared to go to law school very, very rapidly. And this is the part that's very unusual. From the time that I began applying to schools, the deadlines had already passed all over the country, except for a handful. And Florida State was one that had a later deadline. And so I applied to Florida State, and I had no preparation for the LSAT. I took it essentially in the middle of a field exercise, an Army training exercise, and it all just happened very quickly. So I went to law school, and I think the thinking at the time was that, well, between my military service and a law degree, I would get into federal law enforcement. And I did, in fact, apply. It was a long time ago now, but later I applied to be an FBI agent. And I did not get that gig, so I just continued to practice. I'll stop the narrative then and let you ask a question.
All right. What is the most enjoyable part of your job?
Well, and what I do is nearly 100% of my practice is juvenile dependency. I used to represent the state of Florida at the Department of Children and Families. That was years ago. For the past 14, going on 15 years, I've represented parents in dependency court, and I've also represented children in foster care, and that has been the most enjoyable part. It can be heartbreaking, but just helping to give some guidance and some validation and some help to young people in the foster system. That sounds very high-minded. I mean, it sounds like you're really wearing a white hat when I say the words, but it's a reality. There are young people who could use some help, and I probably can't ever do as much for them as they need, or maybe even I ought to, but it gives me great joy when I can help out some people.
Do you work with a team, or do you work by yourself in your environment?
Well, I'm a sole practitioner. In the day-to-day running of my office, I have a part-time paralegal who takes care of some recurring paperwork that I'm very happy to not have to deal with, because of the structure of the life that my wife and I have made. I'm self-employed. My wife homeschools our younger son. So she helps me in the role of what a legal secretary and a receptionist would often do. So very, very small, streamlined operation, because I'm sure you don't know this, but people who represent poor people as the great bulk of their practice don't make a lot of money, and no complaints there. I make plenty, but it's necessary for me to have a really small operation in order to make that work. Now, so the answer would be no, I don't work with a team other than my wife and my paralegal, but that's not true. And if you're litigating at all, you're working with a team, even if it's people that you're in opposition with. In other words, what I do, there are attorneys for the state of Florida, there are caseworkers, there are investigators, there are attorneys for other parents, there are guardians ad litem. So we're not, we're not on the same team per se, but you have to be very good at working with other people all the time.
What do you like least about your job?
It gets, well, and this isn't confined to the practice of law. It can get repetitive. I have been litigating since 1995, and it seems to wear sometimes. On the one hand, when you're in court nearly every day, you get good at it. It becomes not tremendously difficult, because you know the subject matter very well. But it is repetitive. I think the most difficult part is I'm often appointed to indigent people, which can be, meaning poor, okay? They don't have much now. That doesn't mean anything about their character or how friendly they are, nothing at all, and I've always been very pleased to represent the indigent. However, there can be a sense of entitlement among clients when they're not paying for your time out of their own pocket, and just maintaining a professional demeanor, just like anybody else in public service. And your family's been in a service industry.
Yes.
You've been raised in that. You know you have difficult customers, and you know that you can't fail at being pleasant and professional. But that gets tiresome sometimes, because there are folks who just don't respect the skill and the practice and the time that it takes to be good at practicing law. And it never feels good to be taken for granted. So sometimes there seems to be an inordinate amount of people like that, and that can be a burden. But yeah, I still do this. I keep doing it.
Do you see you doing this part of your job forever, or do you see you moving on to something else in the future?
Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, said John Lennon. and it's true. It's good to plan. It's good to have plans. No, I don't see doing this forever. I'm a creative person. I had very concrete reasons for moving to Central Florida and for starting this work, and a lot of those initial reasons have changed, and it had to do with just dynamics in my family and what my kids needed at the time. So that's all changed. And then it's just a matter of inertia. Well, I've built all this trust and goodwill with attorneys and judges over the years, and I've got a book of cases. I've got hundreds of cases, so it's not easy to change as a sole practitioner. It's not a matter of simply leaving one job, applying for another, and getting another job. So that's another overly long answer. The short answer is no, I don't see doing this. I would love a change just because I think that's healthy in life. But I'm neck deep in it right now. It would take a great deal of effort to shut all this down and do something else.
And my last question.
Remember that if you become an attorney, don't get trapped by your own success.
That's noted. All right, my last and final question is, do you see yourself ever becoming a judge of Central Florida?
Yes, I have applied, in fact, and I have been interviewed by our local judicial nominating commission, and that's not a small thing. Just the act of filling out the application for it is daunting, and it's a real gut check about whether or not am I really qualified for this? But I've been told for years and years by people who work around me that I ought to be a judge. I've been told by many judges that they would support me being a judge. I've applied and I've not been appointed. Don't know if I will apply again, but yes, that's something I've been willing to do, and it's something that I never really wanted to particularly until the last year, and then once I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to.
Okay. Well, I would say that was my last question, but
Yeah.
you gave me a new one.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for me if the law career is where I would like to go?
It would be helpful to know your reasons. Unlike me, when I left the Army, I mean, I guess I had a reason, but unlike myself, it would be good to have a sense of why do you want to practice law. Now, once you get into it, that'll change. It will. It's like anything else. Your expectations, reality may not match expectations, and that can be for the good or it could be for the bad. But if you get a sense of why you want to do it, and you know how to steer yourself early, it can be a great career. Don't be afraid to take on as much responsibility as you can early. And by that, I don't necessarily mean join a giant firm downtown and work 80 hours a week and say, give me more, give me more, give me more. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is, I waited too long, I think, working for other people and agencies before I started my own firm. I wish I had done it sooner. Because I tell my older son's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him once he was getting frustrated about not getting interviews and not getting hired. And I told him, I said, a bar license is kind of a license to print money, meaning that you can make up your own job. You can just go out there and get work, whether it's advertising or networking. Figure out what you like to do. It could be elder law, it could be working with kids like I do. It could be, and for my son, it's artistic stuff, intellectual property, helping people with scripts out in Hollywood. Whatever it is, just jump in. Just jump in and do it. Don't wait too long for somebody else to make you a partner or to let you do the stuff you want to do.
Noted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for having me this interview.
It's not. You are welcome, and it's a profession where there's too many of us. There are too many lawyers. It's very competitive. It can be the most rewarding thing in the world. It can open you up to being a politician. It can open up to all sorts of jobs that don't really require you to practice law, but the law degree is helpful. So there's a lot of upside. But I think a lot of young lawyers don't realize it is very competitive out there. Depending on what kind of law you get into, your clients can invade your dreams at night. You know, you're dealing with people's problems. And that's the thing. For a living, you're dealing with the worst things in everybody else's lives, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody hires a lawyer because things are great. People have a problem they just can't handle, and they go hire a lawyer. So you, for a living, all day, are dealing with the worst things that people are experiencing. So there's a lot of good, but it's not all great. All right?
Hey, I need to know this kind of stuff. All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.